July 27, 1953. In the makeshift wooden pavilions of the small border village of Panmunjom, a profound, heavy silence finally descended upon a devastated land. After 3 years of brutal, unyielding, and catastrophic conflict, representatives from the United Nations Command, the Korean People's Army, and the Chinese People's Volunteers gathered to sign the Korean Armistice Agreement. There were no handshakes, no smiles, and no words exchanged between the opposing generals. The atmosphere was completely sterile, reflecting the deep scars of a war that had torn families apart. At precisely 10 a.m., the signatures were finalized, and 12 hours later, the roaring artillery on the front lines went completely quiet. But this document was explicitly not a peace treaty. It was merely a military ceasefire, a temporary suspension of open hostilities designed to stop the bleeding. Little did the delegates know that this temporary pause would evolve into one of the longest-standing truces in human history, permanently defining the geopolitical landscape of the Cold War and dividing a single nation into two opposite worlds down to this very day. To understand the utter exhaustion that forced both sides to the negotiating table in the summer of 1953, we must analyze the grueling, tragic reality of the Korean War. What had begun in June 1950 as a fast-moving war of maneuver had quickly dissolved into a brutal war of attrition by 1951. Following the massive military intervention of 1 million Chinese troops, neither the United Nations forces nor the Communist coalition could secure a total victory without risking a catastrophic Third World War. The conflict reached a bloody stalemate, frozen along a jagged network of mountain trenches near the original 38th parallel. For 2 long years, as diplomats argued over the repatriation of prisoners of war in Panmunjom, young men continued to die by the thousands for mere inches of territory. The human toll on all sides was immense and heartbreaking. Millions of Korean civilians were killed or displaced, their major cities completely leveled by relentless bombing campaigns. By 1953, the international pressure to end active warfare had become unbearable. The death of Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, coupled with a growing anti-war weariness in the United States under President Dwight D. Eisenhower, created a slim diplomatic window. The armistice was not born out of mutual understanding, but out of total material and human exhaustion. The signing of the 1953 agreement did not heal the division of Korea. Instead, it etched a permanent physical barrier across the earth, establishing one of the most heavily fortified and dangerous borders in the world. The armistice mandated that both armies withdraw 2 kilometers from the actual front line, creating a unique 4-kilometer-wide buffer zone known as the Demilitarized Zone, or the DMZ. Ironically, the DMZ became anything but demilitarized. It was rapidly surrounded by millions of landmines, endless rows of electric fencing, concrete tank traps, and hundreds of thousands of heavily armed troops standing on permanent high alert. The DMZ stands as a permanent physical scar of the Cold War. It did not just separate 2 armies, it violently sliced through a shared history, culture, and language, separating millions of families who would never see or speak to each other again. Over the decades, it effectively created 2 entirely distinct, incompatible political realities: a highly isolated, nuclear-armed, totalitarian dynastic state in the north, and a vibrant, technologically advanced, hyper-modern democratic republic in the south, living side by side in a state of perpetual, anxious friction. More than 7 decades after the generals laid down their pens at Panmunjom, the state of war on the peninsula technically persists. Because no formal peace treaty was ever negotiated or signed, the 2 Koreas remain locked in a dangerous diplomatic limbo. The 1953 armistice has profoundly shaped the internal politics, societies, and national psychology of both nations. For North Korea, the unceasing threat of a resumed conflict became the primary justification for its Songun, or military-first policy, driving the regime to bankrupt its economy to develop nuclear weapons as the ultimate survival tool. For South Korea, the constant shadow of war necessitated decades of conscription and a permanent, high-stakes military alliance with the United States. The peninsula remains a critical flashpoint for ongoing international interest and superpower rivalry. The stability of this frozen border involves not just Seoul and Pyongyang, but the strategic calculations of Washington, Beijing, Tokyo, and Moscow. A collapse of the truce could instantly plunge the global economy into chaos, making the maintenance of this fragile 70-year-old ceasefire a vital necessity for global security. The Korean Armistice of 1953 remains a powerful, sobering monument to the complexities of modern conflict resolution, standing to this day as one of the longest-lived, most heavily armed ceasefires in human history. It reminds us that sometimes the end of a war is not a clean resolution, but an enduring state of vigilance, where peace is measured simply by the absence of gunfire. As we look across our modern world, where new frozen conflicts are emerging and old borders are being violently re-examined, the lessons of Panmunjom are more relevant than ever. How do you assess the delicate balance between hard military deterrence and long-term diplomatic resolution in these frozen conflicts? Can a ceasefire alone ever truly guarantee stability, or is it merely a ticking clock waiting for diplomacy to fail? We want to hear your analytical insights and unique perspectives, so please share your thoughts in the comments section down below. If you found this comprehensive historical breakdown valuable, please hit that like button, share this video with a fellow history enthusiast, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another deep dive into the epic world-shaping moments of our shared past. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.